grew up in West Virginia. I then went on to school in Kentucky, to college, back to West Virginia for my master's degree and to Ohio State University for my advanced degree. That's the sum total of my education, except for my experience. And now, 70 years old. And I've had a number of experiences, including the Second World War. I was in the Navy for almost 4 years. I was in the amphibious forces. That we were trained to go into foreign countries or wherever, and as representatives of the United States, of course, and United States services, I was trained in Virginia, in OB, Norfolk, Virginia. And when we went into Normandy, that was a long story of a long bit of training. We went in there on, as you know, on D-Day, and our problem was the weather more than it was the Germans. It was a huge storm. We all became separated, all the invading forces. We landed on over a mile of beach, and most of us didn't land. Our job was to land the troops. The boats were throwing all over the ocean practically, it seemed to me, you know, at the time. I wasn't at all aware of what was going on all the time. But our job was to get the troops ashore, and we managed to do that. And as a consequence, they ran into the hornet's nest when they hit the beach. This was Easy Red Omaha, and that became known as the Bloody Beach. And our troops, along with many of us, were stranded on the beach for all day long. Couldn't get away from the beach because the Germans were right up above us, firing right down on us. That afternoon, the Meredith came in, a destroyer, American destroyer, and went up and down the beach, firing first one side, then the other, at this German nest that they had dug into the cliffs. That did the job. It opened it up a bit for us, and then our boys were able to fight their way up a gully and on top. And by next morning, we landed a plane that night in pieces, and a runway, and a tractor to haul a grader to have an airfield ready. Next morning, that plane took off, spotter plane. The big guns behind the beach that had been firing on the fleet, and the radar towers that they had back there. Now, once we got that spotter plane in the air, then they went down, all of them. And our battleships had pulled up then to within good distance, and they let them have it, and that was the end of their resistance. We were there landing troops the rest of the morning, and we finished our landings. This was Omaha Beach, remember. We finished our landings by 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, in spite of the weather. And the weather was more dangerous to us at that point than were the Germans, I think, although the Germans were firing on us the whole time. The weather we simply couldn't whip, and it was almost defeated us. But by dark that night, the boys had broken through, went up a little gully in the cliff. There's about a 1,000-foot cliff there that we were fighting. They had it mined up above, and they had guns in there. They were shooting down on us, and the Merediths silenced those guns by running up and down and shooting right in there. This was the wonderful part of the day, when we realized that those guns had been silenced, and our boys could get up this gully and approach the top. And at that point, the Germans were driven back. And that was D-Day. After the war was over, and it did end finally, another year, I went back to school, West Virginia, for my master's and on to Ohio State for my doctorate, and in history. So I became what was known as a kind of a historian, but that they wouldn't let me work as a historian. I became an administrator, college administrator instead. Suddenly somebody came along and was mistaken enough to offer me a job as a dean of a college. And from then on, I was a dean or vice president in about 4 different places. My last position was at Temple University, and I was vice president for research. And so for the next 30 years, I was a dean or vice president or something of that kind. My wife, we were married before the war. We went to school together at West Virginia. And our first child was born early in the war. She was my helpmate and my idol, I guess, for the next 50 years. We were married a total of 60 years, 70 years, 70 years. She'd been gone now for two years. She was wonderful. Well, first of all, get an education. Figure out where you're strongest. Work hard at it. Don't go into something just because it sounds like it'll make money or something of that sort, but go into it because you love it. And then pick your profession and do a good job of it. And the way to do that is to prepare to start with. And once you're prepared, the rest of it takes care of itself.